YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for December 14th through 20th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 4 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 1 book. First this week I finished a graphic novel called Another Kind. This is about a group of 6 kids who are paranormal and they're all basically staying in the same location for their own safety, but pretty much none of them have gone there because they want to. One of the things I really liked about this is we got all of their backstories throughout this time frame in these little flashbacks, and it was kind of fun to figure out exactly what kind of powers these kids had as time went on, because you look at them and you're like, okay, some of them look vaguely human, but like what can they do? And then all of a sudden you've got somebody who can transform into a werebear. You've also got this other one that looks a little bit different, but then if he tries really hard he can transform into a human. And then realizing exactly what he was, I laughed really hard. We've also got a Selkie, which I personally love to see, someone else who is Fae, someone else who I'm pretty sure was the child of Cthulhu, and we've got a Yeti, and that backstory, wow. So they're all in this underground containment thing doing the same things day in and day out, and it suddenly seems like somebody knows where they are, so they need to be transferred to a different place. However, on the way to that place, things happen, adventures ensue. I won't say any more than that other than I really enjoyed this. The art was beautiful, the different dynamics between characters were honestly heartwarming at times, and if this sounds at all interesting to you, you should pick it up. The other book I read with my eyeballs is Dead and Breakfast. This book is absolutely incredibly campy and I loved it. This is about 2 vampires who have moved to this small town in Oregon called Trident Falls, and they've opened up a bed and breakfast. There's pretty much always been a bed and breakfast at this location, at least for the last couple hundred years or so, but the old owner retired and they've taken it over. They've done renovations and now they're just waiting for customers to come in. However, in this world, paranormals are kind of looked down upon. In fact, a lot of the insults that are thrown around towards these vampires could be thrown around in our world towards gay people, to the point where when somebody calls them bloodsuckers, you know what they'd really be calling them in our world. One day, something goes awry and a body is found very near to the bed and breakfast, and Arthur Miller, no relation, our main character, realizes that he needs to solve this, otherwise it's going to be pinned on him or his husband Salvatore. So he becomes this amateur sleuth to figure out who could have killed this person, why they would have put them in his begonia garden, and what exactly is going on. This book is full of puns and jokes, but then also heartwarming moments and just these great things that happen between different characters, and I absolutely adored it. This appears to be the first in a series. It just came out though, so I'm waiting to see what comes up next to this series because I will definitely want to read it. On to what I watched this week. I finished the 28th season of Silent Witness, which is a show you've probably figured out considering how many seasons I've consumed. I really enjoy quite a lot. Additionally, there's this thing that happens every once in a while when you have a show that is this long running, and that's that sometimes you reuse actors you've used in previous series in completely different roles, and that definitely happened with an actor this season. I've caught this happening at least once before, I feel like twice before, but I can only remember who the actor was one of those times. And in this series in particular, the actor that was reused was Joe Absalom, who I also know from Doc Martin. But I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure he's been in this before, and I looked it up to make sure. I'm like, yes, he has, and now he plays a very major role in one of the 2-parters. Which I'm actually not mad at, you know, the UK isn't that big. Sometimes you gotta reuse actors like several series apart who are playing different characters. That's fine, especially when you give them a really juicy character arc. Speaking of the UK, the first episode of Jet Like the Game Hide and Seek in the UK came up on Nebula this week, so I watched that. If you don't have Nebula, it will come up on YouTube on Wednesday, so you should watch it. This is their usual format of playing hide and seek across a certain geographical location, and in this case, it's the UK, which is exciting for me because I've been to the UK quite a few times. I used to live there, so if they end up in any of the places that I've been, I'm going to be really excited about it. So far, they've had some fun things happen with train lines and figuring things out and thinking they were going in the right direction and then not necessarily doing that, and the audience knows what's going on because we're getting a narrator being like, hey, this is why the thing we're about to maybe do is really dumb. Let's see if we do it. It's just delightful. Next, also in the UK, I needed a new crime show to watch because I'd finished Silent Witness. The new series of Shetland doesn't start coming out until January, so I started watching something that only has a couple of seasons, and that's called Save Me. This stars Lenny James, who I know from The Walking Dead and then other things, and then also Chad was going through his IMDb and he's like, oh, he was in the 1998 Les Mis, and I was like, you know what, that's probably the one where they just like kept coming to the front of the stage and singing their parts and then backing off, and if I had to guess, completely guess, out of the whole cast of Les Mis, who he probably played, I would just assume Enjolras. And he looked through it and he's like, Enjolras? And I was like, are you kidding me? I randomly picked which character he played in Les Mis from 1998? That's amazing. In any case, with this show, which only has 2 series, which makes me wonder if the mystery of this series is going to carry over, if there's going to be a second mystery in the second series. I don't know, I'm only halfway through the first series. He plays a character named Nellie who is kind of floating through life. He doesn't really have a permanent address. He's seeing this woman, but then he's seeing other people behind her back. He has this local pub that he's often found at, and all of a sudden one day the cops break down the door to the place where he's staying and arrest him because his daughter, who he hasn't seen in 10 years, has gone missing, and specifically she left a message saying that she is going to find her dad. Now, he's only ever seen her before once when she was 3, and they didn't even get to interact, and he signed away his parental rights so that the mother's husband could actually adopt her formally. And now she is missing, and she left behind this video saying, hey, it's just gonna be a week, Mom, I'm gonna go visit my dad. But obviously her parents are not cool with that randomness, and it looks like somebody claiming to be her dad has been talking to her online for like a year and has finally been like, hey, we should actually meet. And this person has some actual details of Nellie's life, so he feels like it must be somebody he knows that has done this. So now he is very determined to figure out who kidnapped his estranged daughter. So far, I'm really into it. I want to know how this all shakes out. This also has the guy that plays Jamie Tart in it from Ted Lasso. He plays an older stepbrother to the person who's missing. And then it also has this actor named Stephen Graham, who is an actor that you look at him and you're like, I've seen you in something. And that something could be any number of things because he is in a lot of things. And then there's these other actresses that I'm just like, I've definitely seen you in things, I've definitely seen you in things, and I just assumed that they've played characters in the various crime shows I've been watching this year. The one other show I watched was the very first episode of the 2nd season of Fallout. Now, I watched the 1st season when it came out, whenever that was. It feels like it was at least 3 years ago, and I definitely watched all of that, and do I remember anything? No. So there was a previously on at the beginning of this episode, which was great, and I watched it and went, oh yeah, that seems vaguely familiar, and then a bunch of things where I was like, I don't remember this at all. But one of the biggest draws for watching the 2nd season for me personally is I know a certain actor is going to be on it because I was just recently watching a lot of different episodes of Last Meals here on YouTube, which is when famous people eat what they would pick if they were to pick their last meal and they're interviewed. And recently I watched the episode with Macaulay Culkin, and it turns out he really liked the 1st season and then ends up on the 2nd season. However, he's not in the 1st episode, so I'm waiting to see how his character eventually plays into the season. And of course Walton Goggins is just being amazing, and I'm sure this will go great, but I really should have rewatched the 1st season because I'm drawing a blank on most of the things that happened. Or I'm like, oh yeah, that happened, that's why that person doesn't have an eye, and oh, this is a thing. But it's not super present in my brain. As for the movie I watched, it's technically, I'm pretty sure, a made-for-TV movie because watching it, there's definitely points where it kind of blacks out and blacks in, which were definitely commercial breaks. And because I'm very familiar with the source material, I definitely noticed when a certain phrase was made PG. Somehow, I didn't know that back in 2016, they remade the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Semicolon, let's do the time warp again. Or something like that. That's how they're distinguishing it from the original. Now, the funny thing about this is I noticed 2 things while looking at this listing. 1, it has Laverne Cox as Frankenfurter and Adam Lambert as Eddie, which I was super into, and then also Tim Curry also comes back and plays the criminologist slash narrator. And then the second thing I noticed is the service I was looking at it on has the ratings for a couple of different websites, and one of them says the rating was 23%, and the other one said the rating was 25%, and I went, oh, is it that bad? So I decided to watch it, not having my expectations all too high, and it turns out I didn't hate it. There were certain aspects of it in the way it was directed that I was like, I wouldn't have done it that way, but whatever, okay, fine. And for the most part, I can say that I really enjoyed the actual performances. I was unaware that Laverne Cox could dance like that. I can only assume she had to go through a lot of training to get ready for this role. And I kind of felt like Adam Lambert's talent was actually underutilized as Eddie. It was maybe just something in the mix of the track where you couldn't actually hear the really cool things he was doing with his vocals, because the vocals maybe weren't loud enough compared to the music. Maybe it was just that, I'm not entirely certain. And there was a little bit too much interaction going back to the movie theater aspect of this. I know why it happened, because there's so many traditions when you watch this in a theater with the newspaper or throwing things or yelling things, so I know why we were doing that, but it just happened too often for my personal tastes. So in summary, I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I assumed I would. As for the audiobook I listened to this week, that was The Battle of the Labyrinth, which is the 4th book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. Being the 4th book in this series, I really can't tell you too much, because obviously I'm gonna spoil things from the beginning, but of course we go on another adventure in this. Of course, certain things from previous plots are brought forward. There's one in particular that ends up tying up that I really liked seeing how that tied up. There's a little bit of tension between multiple sets of characters. And in this one, I think it was the first time where we introduced more people from Greek mythology that I hadn't heard of than I had heard of. So we're getting deep into that source material. Also, I had to listen to this one fairly quickly because it was due back to the library fairly quickly, so I probably missed a couple of little things, and that's on me. But I think I mostly understood what was going on. I think I mostly got all of the little points, and I am excited to continue. Once again, I'm just really excited that it doesn't feel so cookie cutter as it did when I read the first one and then I read the second one, and they basically seem to start out and be the same thing. Sure, we still started this with a school visit and something going wrong, but it didn't feel the same way it did in the previous books. And we've got more characters now. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Happy holidays. Bye!